This episode of Laugh It Off. We're here in a sidebar conversation with none other than Therapist Jeff, aka my dad.
Do you deal with a lot of this in your therapy room? Not 150 at a time?
Hitchhiked to the States at what age?
Well, the first time was 12 when your issues now pop up and the game begins.
Welcome him onto stage for the first time. Give it up for the one, the only, Jeff Packer.
I love Chicago.
Everybody. This is everybody.
Oh, okay. Hello,
we happen
everybody.
to be in Chicago right now.
We sure are.
Yeah.
It's been great.
Yeah.
See the city, hey? Have some fun.
Amazing.
Get to hang out with my son and even participate in one of his shows.
My dad's on tour with me. How crazy is that? It's amazing. This all came to be because, we've started, this is only episode 3 of Laugh It Off. We've done it so far. I told my dad that we're going to do the next one in Chicago. And out of excitement, he booked a ticket. Just sends me the plane ticket. And I go, this is just more than perfect.
Well, first I said no at least a couple of times. I was encouraged by your mom.
To go create a memory.
And booked the ticket. And here we are.
Yeah, you did. You're doing so great on the show, as people can see so far. And I just wanted to give people an opportunity for a more kind of, I guess, personal touch on just talking about the conversation of therapy and how you got into it. And because I just, you're my dad, so I just grew up knowing you do this for a living.
And you didn't hear a lot of about the stories of how I got motivated. And I joke around with people even, that I grew up in a pretty high conflict, dysfunctional family, high conflict, separation, divorce, substance misuse, lots of alcoholism, even violence. And they didn't know they were preparing me to be a therapist. Who knew? I didn't know either. And, who would have thought that kind of adversity would lead to wanting to help people going through those kind of struggles?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's incredible, too, because you are able to get into these deep conversations with so many people so quickly. Even just today, we go to Starbucks to get a coffee, and in the time it takes me to go to the counter and order the coffee, I look over, and you've already struck up a conversation with the woman next to you that I almost felt like you had already known each other when I sat back down with the coffee.
Yeah, I'm introducing Andrew to her as he sits back down, and turns out she was just waiting for a flight and having a good day. And then there was a connection, a Persian person, right, who actually then was happy to find out that you'd married someone with Persian descent.
Yeah, so an easy connection there. I mean, anytime Persian people get to know that other people are connected that way, I mean, they claim them, and it's such a welcoming culture in that way.
Oh, she said, no wonder I love your wife already when she saw a picture, and then you said where she was from. So yeah, that's one of the things I think that kind of background left me open to talking with people, talking to lots of people, partly for survival, as a younger person, taking off, leaving home, running away, hitchhiking across the country, down to the States. Very, very dangerous situations, but you had to talk to lots of people to survive. And I was fortunate I did. A lot of people don't.
I mean, I feel like I can't gloss over this too much. I do know the story a little bit, but you say you hitchhiked to the States at what age?
Well, the first time was 12. Hitchhiked, I only made it to Buffalo, so I was going to Florida. I always wanted to go where the warm weather is. I thought my parents should have actually had me born in Florida.
This is where I'm getting it from, because this has been a constant gripe of I've been saying just every time this time of year comes, I'm like, why don't we all just get up and move somewhere warm? But you already had this passion and desire in your heart. And
passed down through the generations.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the second time I actually
Just
made
pull the mic a little bit closer.
Well, the second time I actually made it, 14.
Yeah.
He said to a buddy, hey, you want to go to Florida? We had $5 each and took off. And got through the border and made it right down to Orlando.
That's incredible. How many days did it take?
I think it took about 3 or 4 days. It wasn't that long. Some people helped us out in Syracuse. They saw that we weren't even dressed properly. They even gave us heavy socks and things. And people are very kind, and most people are very friendly and polite. But I don't advise anybody does that because of the high risk. I said most people, and some people, we're lucky we got away from some people, let's say that.
Yeah, I can only imagine. I feel like hitchhiking is not something that's that common anymore. It was
Not
more
at
of
all.
something that could only have happened during the 70s.
Oh, in the 70s, people, there was a line up in Banff, 16, 18 people, and you just took your turn. And 3, 4 hours later, you'd be the one, you'd get a ride. And you'd be off to BC.
It's essentially a bus stop, but just the common people, just good Samaritans.
Put out your thumb, and they pick you up, and off you go. And I got to pick cherries in the Penticton Valley for 30 days, and it's beautiful.
So you just made pit stops when it was convenient? So
When you needed money, go and work, do what you could to pick up enough money to make it to the next place. But again, I think it's just a blessing that I was able to survive that, and then to take that forward and say people are struggling and a lot of difficulties in their families, all kinds of issues, and the viewers know those issues. Everybody's got some kind of a burden from the past. So, I went into sales, I went into work. And then I thought, this isn't fulfilling. I wanted to do something to help people who are also struggling in families. And after meeting your mom, who knew a dropout in grade 11 3 times would get to go to university and get some training to be able to find out some of the scientific approaches to help people as well.
yeah, I mean, that's incredible. As an adult now, also reflecting back on just what it would take in that story and having lived through those ages of where you made those decisions, it is, it's an incredible thing to pull off, to go from not like graduating high school to, you made career in business through drive and work ethic, and then still going back and getting your not just your degree undergrad, but also your master's in social work.
Very fortunate to have that opportunity, and to have your mother's blessing and support, and a lot of other people, even someone who I didn't know I was in care at 18 months, 24 months. They were a principal of a school up in Fenelon Falls, and this person actually signed a letter for me to get into university as a mature student.
Sorry, who was this person to you before?
This was Ben Dalby, and I just met him one day at church, and it turns out I said my name, and he almost fainted, and he said, "You were in our care." I didn't know I was in CAS care, but I had been put in their home, a receiving home, from 18 months to 3 years old. And his wife, May, said, "Oh, we wanted to keep you." And
Wow.
yeah, so to meet them just randomly at 28.
That's crazy.
Yeah, 25 years later.
At church, you just met them, then they recognized you based on the name.
Yeah, they started showing videos of us.
They had videos from back then?
There was a little 8mm videos of us at the zoo, my brother and myself. My sister was placed somewhere else. So it was really neat to see videos of yourselves as kids, and kind of had a bit of a memory of their older daughters, and they just loved you and had lots of tulips. I remember that. Of course, we beat on them. You weren't supposed to, because you're acting out. You're not with your parents. You're separated.
Well, I mean, you're between the age of like 2 and 3, I guess, when you're with them. So
Yes.
I don't think anyone would hold that against you.
It's
You're
kind of normal.
peeing everywhere.
Kind
At
of
that
normal.
point.
That's right. You're learning how to aim.
I don't even think that's malicious at that point. You're just kind of, hey, this is where I happen to be.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's that kind of background that really propelled me forward to have sometimes too much of an optimistic view. Sometimes I've been accused of that a few times, of being too optimistic.
Like in your current
Yes.
state and age?
Yes. And then, kind of surviving that. I mean, we look up to our Maker and thank our Maker for that protection, but a lot of people don't make it through that. A lot of people have a lot of different issues and addictions that come out of that they can hardly ever get out of, or they might not run into the right type of support, or a person that fits for them, whether it's a therapist or, a pastor, or whether it's just a friend. Some people just don't run into that person that knows without a doubt. It's the environment, not the person that's bad or wrong. Stuff in the environment just not working out, and children act up. There's a lot of acting up too. I'm not proud of a lot of that.
Yeah, and then you found a way to curb that behavior, but I mean, you definitely wanted to, because it's something I've noticed with a lot of friends of mine, or certain friends that have had, relationships come and go, and a lot of times I'll see the relationship there'll be something, maybe with addiction involved, or a lack of wanting to maybe mature, or just even general direction with their life, not wanting to, I don't know, because there is that whole double standard that is just inevitable, that is right down into the biology, especially at my age group, of there's a biological clock, and it's, very significant and just fact of the matter for women. But if the guys are not fully committed in the relationship and wanting to have, or sure that they want kids in their life, then they don't feel any pressure to make the decision to go ahead with it.
Well, if they don't feel like, as you said, they're mature enough. And there's a thing called developmental immaturity, or stunting. When you have a lot of bad things happen in your childhood, you're maybe 5, 10, 15 years behind in some of the maturing process. And you see it later on, as you say, with immaturity and acting out and not really seeming motivated to get out of the negative behavioral pattern. But everybody's growing and developing. And by 25, we get our full brain. The organizational part in the front, as well as the amygdala's, emotional regulation. So we get that at 25. I often say, like, the first 25 doesn't count. Be kind to yourself. You get a little more motivated at 24, 25, 26 to change how we do things. And that's when we hope we have some support and some people around us that can help us figure out how to rewrite the story, the narrative in our mind, and really retrain the body to be a lot more polite and friendly. Working a long time on the eyebrows to be friendly under duress. Do lots of box breathing, 3 to 5 deep breaths to keep the body regulated during tense times. We can all do well in relaxed times and fun times. It's during tense times we want to train our body face tone to be a little more friendly, loving, kind, polite. And that's an art for all of us.
Yeah. When you say rewriting the narrative, do you think that's something that a lot of people kind of understand out the gate? Or is that something that comes up that people don't really haven't really heard it phrased like that before?
No, but it does get curiosity, just like you're saying there. The curiosity's there. So if you think about the brain as being pretty much an empty container as far as data about the world as we're growing up. So it's our brain. The brain is being loaded by parents, friends, teachers, relatives, books, movies, the internet. Everything we smell, touch, taste goes on the brain. The brain must take that data and turn it into meaning for us. I thought we did that. But no, when we're just little, the brain's actually what it means to be a boy or girl, what it means to go to school or not, what it means to be good or bad. So the brain makes up narratives, really, stories that give us meaning and help us feel good and comfortable on planet Earth. When we're 25, 30, 35, most people don't even do this work on childhood issues until that age. We really want to be, rewriting the narrative with more accuracy, rather than the age 5, 6, 7 very concrete brain, good, bad, I'm good, they're bad, or the other way around. Usually, most of us would adopt the story of I'm bad, they're better. And if that sticks with you a long time, it becomes a dominant narrative that drives very negative behavior and the inability to change.
I think is the concrete kind of structure of being a kid and these simple positive negatives, binary kind of things. For example, I always think back, or I had a revelation in my early 20s coming out of the academic, institutions, finally relieved of that. Just the idea of smart and how dumb of a concept to be just smart, and how limiting that is as a concept to just label somebody smart, or this person is smarter than me, or this person is dumber than me, or I'm more intelligent than this person.
It's true.
Is such a very minute, small, closed, in the same way that good and bad.
Well, it's part of that negative narrative. I often say the comparisons. It doesn't matter to compare to our own behavior last week. We want to do better. But comparing to other people, we don't have enough data to even do the comparison. So that's where it becomes derogatory. I should be like, and that negative voice, I call it stinking thinking. It doesn't usually compare us to people that are doing really worse. It compares us to somebody that looks like they're doing a bit better. So we want to stay away from comparisons and really look at the history a little differently. And some people can use books, but really getting a coach or a therapist helps guide that kind of rewriting process. You identify the negative, kind of dominant negative. Most of the data on our brain is helping us do life. I'd say that negative data might be a small percentage, say 5%, for talk's sake. And that negative part can just almost seem to overtake your whole day as it takes over your conscious mind. I'm no good. I can't do this. Like with me smoking, I'm no good. I shouldn't smoke. This is awful. That kind of negative view left me entrenched in it. Mm-hmm. And then I'm saying, I better stop smoking. I didn't realize I was loading on the brain smoking.
Right.
Instead of, hey, I want to be healthier, breathe more, fresh, more active, more energy. Then you're focus on what you want. You're more likely to get it. That's part of that changing the narrative. And we're all doing cognitive shifting from the time we're little, but to do it more intentionally around those areas of problematic behavior.
I guess also what I'm trying to understand though, is it bad for, I'm actually structuring it in bad.
The bad, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean.
Well, we do get away from those terms, like good, bad, right, wrong,
never
always, black and white thinking, global thinking.
Do you try to get away from those terms for kids though? Or is this just work that adults can really have the cognitive ability to handle? Or can kids kind of grasp these abstract concepts?
Definitely. Kids grab it, but you want to actually present it in more of a childlike 6-year-old, 8-year-old, 9-year-old concept. I remember one young fella, he didn't want to do his diabetes management. He didn't want to take his needles. Who would blame a little 6-year-old for not wanting to do that? And he thought he was, just against it. And I asked him, I just switched gears. What would Batman do? I said, do you know Batman? He said, what do you mean, do I know Batman? His mom leaned back, do you know Batman? I said, who does Batman fight off? And he said, the evil one, the villain, Doc Ock. And I wasn't going to tell him that's Spider-Man, so we just left it at that. Okay. I said, what does he use in Batman? He Batarang, the Battermobile or the Batmobile, all these different things he uses. I said, so Batman's got to fight off evil with all these tools. I said, it's almost like you're like a superhero. He goes, what? I said, you're like a superhero. You're fighting off the evil diabetes with what? What tools do you have? He says, I've got my finger poker, got my blood checker. I have my parents. We talked about that, and then he started feeling stronger, like he's fighting something off rather than he's underneath something. That doesn't last maybe 3 months, 6 months, 8 months. So it's something we've got to maintain, and even coaching family members and parents helps us to maintain that move forward and changing the narrative from, I'm underneath stuff. It's back to my childhood. Grow up with, it's been so awful. That'll still come up even from time to time now. That I'm behind because of this or that. No, I'm ahead in a lot of ways because of that as well. And think about all the adversity you've been through and what you've learned from that.
The silver lining that you've built.
Well, I didn't even build it, if you think about it. You start actually growing and learning from the pain, the suffering, the sorrow. Just like pain in the leg. You get pain, you get off it. And then you think, well, I better get help. So psychological pain does the same thing for us. Mm-hmm. Helps us stretch and figure out ways to change, grow, develop.
Within the concept of laugh it off now.
It's a funny idea, and I'm kind of biased. It's my son's show.
Well, I'm so happy that you're a part of it. I mean, it is, I think it makes the show so much more personal and just better all around. I think what's so incredible about it is that we have these very highs of laughs throughout the show, but then there are these random moments where you drop into full therapist mode and start name dropping these great authors and psychologists,
resources
and
people can use.
Your line of work and area, and then throwing in some ideas there, and like I think like last night, literally in one of the topics, you went on one of those small rants.
A little bit of a mini rant.
Then this girl at the back was like, "Let him cook," and just started.
So you could see you were about to turn on to the next problem or whatever.
Yeah.
Let him go, and I could tell I was going a bit long there.
No, it was great, and I love that we have that range of feeling, and I think it makes the show just so interesting and different from anything else that's out there.
Mm-hmm.
Do you find that? I mean, I just couldn't believe how many people were reaching out and how many people were putting in ideas out of we had 100 people in there, about 150 different topics kind of coming in.
And someone actually said at one point, "Do you deal with a lot of this in your therapy room?" And not 150 at a time. That was a lot of things.
Yeah, it's like an onslaught of topics. I guess, yeah. Like,
and good job for those people, for some of them being very transparent, very open about some of the challenges they're facing, and even standing up and, admitting that was them. Good for them, for the courage. And we talked about vulnerability as a strength. It's harder sometimes for guys to get that, being able to identify our limits and our areas of growth that are needed.
And that's why I think it was important to put the option into their side.
Yes.
They can submit the topic with complete anonymity, whatever you want. You don't have to put a real name. You just put it out there. And then if we have more questions for you and you want, as you see at the beginning of the episode, people were a little nervous. People didn't want to kind of come out and say that I'm the one. Exactly. And then finally some people started doing it. And then one guy with a very, very
different issue.
A
little bit twist on that issue.
Little bit, definitely an odd thing to put out there.
Different type of an addiction.
Yes.
Fetish.
A foot fetish. And he was very open about, and I feel like
good for him.
Good for him, because not only did it just, he owned it and people kind of cheered for him for that.
Well, and he turned it in. Yeah.
But it also allowed everyone after to kind of relieve some of the fear of putting themselves out there.
Exactly. I mean, who's going to match that one?
I mean, if I'm going to talk about my boss is a little bit annoying after the guy who says he has a foot fetish. I mean, pretty wild.
Yes. Yeah. But everybody, if you think about it, everybody's problem is significant. Even the little child, 5 years old, breaks a yellow crayon, loves yellow. That's just as big an issue as losing your job when you're 28, 30. That's a tough thing to see. To really remind ourselves that that's a very tough issue for a 5-year-old. Something for a 45-year-old might seem insignificant, but to them, that's a very serious issue.
Inside the show, sometimes, I mean, we find humor in belittling those issues a little bit, and there's definitely an angle in that. Like this one girl, we're talking about her birthday party that she had when she was in grade 2, and then grade 3, and then grade 4 was an absolute disaster, and it was the first thing that came to mind when she had something to give up. And she must be at least 15-20 years past this moment now, and of course the comedian that's on stage made his jokes about how that is
kind of downplayed it, minimized.
Is that like kind of the wrong thing to do within the idea of trying to heal and acknowledge that? Or is there some benefit to making humor about why am I letting that weigh on me when that's such a small, insignificant part of my life at this point? Like,
I think you've answered. It's both.
Okay.
It's both. If it's bothering someone that much at 25, 35, 45, then there's something there that we're not getting. There's information still there. Something happened in that grade 2, 3, 4, and the person might have given us the surface bit. And a lot of people will come into therapy and give you a little bit, and 6 months later give you a little bit more, because they're building confidence in the person that's helping them. So you're right. We want to validate that something about that wasn't the greatest for that person, and how that shook out. And it might have had a trajectory then that the next 15 years didn't go well, because that person could start thinking, oh, people don't like me. They don't want to, come to my party or enjoy my life or be with me. And then it becomes the dominant narrative. At 25, 30, no one likes me. I say stinking thing is like a one-way trip to Eeyorville. Oh, bother. Nobody's going to bring me a balloon. It's easy for our brain to get into that zone.
Yeah.
And it gets locked in. And then myself at 21, 22, not very nice behavior. I said, that's the way I am. And that's a solid stop to change and growth. So all of us, I think, got to get out of that we can't.
Yeah.
and change it too. Yes, we can, with the right help, with the right assistance and information, loading the brain with new information, pushing away some of that negative, so to speak, into the background or into the trash bin.
Totally. I mean, I can even relate with that topic of the girl with the birthday parties and such, because even it's wild how this stuff can just come back and out of nowhere connect a feeling to a certain set of circumstances that seems so distant and different from childhood. Because I can remember, I mean, the birthday party is a big thing when you're a kid. When you're, you know, you have all your friends come over from school and they're at your house, that place that they've never been.
For those that have the birthday parties.
Yeah, okay. Well, I'm lucky enough to have birthday parties, and I had so many fun birthday parties. But I remember specifically, there's like a transition point that happens, you know, when you're going from your elementary or middle school into high school, and your friends are all kind of shuffling around. And my birthday's in November, so you're only a few months in to the school year at this point during this whole shuffle.
Yes,
and I remember in grade 9, I'm like figuring out kind of who my set of friends are in groups, and I'm trying to expand my friend groups a little bit. And I had a birthday party, and I remember inviting quite a few people. I think I only had like 4 or 5 friends show up, and I remember, you know, being disappointed, but like we had fun with it. And you know, you go on, you create the narrative, and you go on living, and whatnot. It was great.
It's a big transition, that grade 9. It's, you know, going into a bigger population school.
Yeah.
Some of your friends go off in this direction. You say, I'm not going to. So you got to develop new friends.
You got a whole Rolodex of names that are hard to juggle because you got so many more people. And
first couple of months in grade 9, they're very tricky. And then for the people that have birthdays in the summer, they can grow up really, you know, upset or resentful that they didn't have those school year kind of birthday times where people would come over.
100%. And that's their struggle. But it was weird because not too long ago, like a couple months ago, I set up a thing for a few friends to come out to just like a hangout, which I do work a lot. It's probably not the best. Like I'm always doing shows and stuff. But this was a night I was taking off to have a few friends out, and a couple of friends came, but one friend who was like I was trying to make a connection with or whatever didn't come. And it was wild because it wasn't like my logical brain. I was very much like, yeah, it's fine. Like I know you got a lot going on.
Exactly.
But physically in that moment, I felt the sensation that reminded me of the sensation I felt then. And because I think we've kind of talked about how this stuff kind of works.
The past-present connection. Yeah.
I was unteasing those emotions and those feelings, but without knowing how to like connect those things, I can see how that affects your action from there.
Oh yes, and then we have defense mechanisms in our brain. They help us when we're children, for the most part, protect us. You don't have car keys to get out of the situation. You don't have another house to go to. So when bad things happen, the child's brain can go, no big deal, denial, minimization, it's not a big deal, rationalize, justify, and you show up at school the next day, bad thing happens at home the night before, teacher says, how are you? Fine. Amazing. That protects us from just melting down. And not everybody's defenses hold up, depending on how difficult the situation is. So then you get fast forward 10, 20 years. That is the dominant narrative. Those wounds, the initial wounds, can come out in romantic relationships, friendship relationships. We could sometimes call it attachment. You know, when there's broken attachments in childhood with parents, with loved ones, grandparents, whoever your caregivers are, then those broken attachment issues will spill into close relationships later on. Not everyday relationships necessarily at work or friends, but you get into a close, intimate relationship, and after the honeymoon period, these issues start to pop up. People start thinking, oh no, maybe we're not in love. No, that's about when your issues now pop up and the game begins of helping each other grow and develop those areas that we've been wounded or hurt or we didn't necessarily get skills taught.
Yeah, people call it showing you they're crazy.
And you can say crazy behavior for sure, but as you've said in a few of your jokes, it's not a good idea to call someone that.
We'll separate the person from the action, right?
Yes.
You're a person, but you're showing your person they're crazy.
Yes, we can call out the behavior. and you know, that's a beautiful thing for mental fitness. We can actually still validate the person as an amazing human being who's got awful behavior over here. And that separating the behavior from the person is like a person first. They call it person first language now. You're not a person necessarily with diabetes. You're a person with diabetes. You're not a diabetic. You're a person who's on the spectrum of autism. You're not autistic. So we don't tend to do that with the mental health stuff. We just say, oh, they're crazy or they're this or that, instead of, no, they're a person who's got some erratic behavior, impulsive behavior, addictive behavior even.
Yeah.
But as we said last night, most of the addictions, Gabor Mate, famous Canadian researcher, doctor, and trauma specialist, says it's all related to trauma. Traumatic injuries in the past, addictions are connected to that. Yeah. It's maybe less healthy coping or unhealthy coping, but as we get healthier coping, the less healthy coping can go down. So it's really important to find new skills, develop new skills, and then the less healthy coping. And that's part of retraining our body and how it copes with stress and difficulties.
How important do you think it is to have these subtle alterations in our language? Because I think it does frustrate a lot of people in casual conversations.
Yes, it does.
When they're, especially if you're emotional and then you're making these subtle differences, or you're making the subtle differences because you know about them, but your emotion and inflection is all saying the opposite anyway. You know, you're saying you're a person that's acting crazy, but you can tell your whole tone and face and everything is just saying you're calling you crazy. Yes. And then there's the flip side of like venting. And when you're venting about things to your friends and stuff, like at what point does that get unhealthy if you're not using the right terminology?
Oh, we call wordsmithing. And we wordsmith too much. And, you know, I'm guilty as anybody else of, you know, let's correct this word or that word. However, if the research is accurate, 85% of what people pay attention to decide what to do next is nonverbal. So we're watching each other, we're listening, even if we were blind, we're listening to tone, we're listening to movements. So we're focused on so much data that we put a lot of emphasis in the words.
Yeah.
Take that emphasis away, as you say. We can get too caught up in the words. Face and tone is something we can work on. So if you say, hey, I really love you, that doesn't come across. It's confusing, you know, as opposed to, you know, changing the face, changing the tone, changing the posture, and how we deliver a message as well. That's all part of that retraining process.
It's arguably more important than subtle word differences. But if you have the subtle word differences, intention and meaning internalized, then the way you emote that will be aligned.
Yeah, and as you're saying that, I'm thinking, provided we're doing it with ourselves. I did it a long time as a therapist, even working with other people, and had a 15-year-old challenge me on change your thinking. Your thinking's there. Your thinking drives feeling, drives the behavior. Why are you still smoking? He said to me. I said, good call. I found I wasn't talking very nicely to myself. And you're supposed to find the negative thoughts that are in behind the negative behavior. And I searched and got defensive. And no, I just smoke. I don't think. And then finally one day in 1995, I went out on the front porch and heard myself saying, you idiot, you jerk, you'll never stop smoking. You smoke. With that kind of venomous face. And I didn't realize thoughts have face and tone as well. So that's really a start for me in thinking, wow, we've got to talk nicely to ourselves. The more we start to be nice to ourselves, understand ourselves, be more loving and kind and patient and forgiving in the back of our head, then it'll spill onto those around us.
Yeah, and I mean, it's funny. This makes me think of, I was trying to flex it as a premise on stage. I haven't really figured it out yet or what the joke is, but it was rooted out of just this like emotional riff that I do sometimes in the car on the way to gigs. I'll just have music playing and I'll just start talking out loud and just find where my head and emotion are at. And you know, Tara's sitting there, my wife, and she's like, do you have to do this? No, this is only when I'm alone. I'm not making her go through this.
Good for you. It'd be a lot for her to take.
But yeah, I got into this rant of thinking about my dreams, and you know, I have dreams, and how is it that I have dreams and I hear myself with these dreams and these goals that I want. I want these goals and I want these dreams, and then later my own brain will tell me that those are not possible.
I love it.
Whose team are you on?
Stinking thinking.
You're in my brain. Well, we all have a positive opportunity here to make this go well and believe. And my own thought feed is coming in.
That's the no stinking thinking. We call it that like a virus. I think of it as like a virus on your computer. You're a supercomputer. Think of it like a virus on the computer. You're saying you have these goals and everything, and then the negative voice says, sure, if you just do this or that or the other thing, it'll just happen for you. It sounds like your friend. No, you work hard at it, and then it'll happen for you. But it says if you just meet the right person or go to the right stage or something, it'll happen. No, sometimes it actually lulls us. Even your mom's a great baker, as you know, and I'll go into the house, I'll say, I'm going to have 2 cookies. The real Jeff says 2 cookies. The negative voice pops in and says, have 7. You've earned it. You worked hard. I'll listen to it. It's like your buddy. Thanks, dude.
Yeah.
And as soon as you finish the 7th cookie, what's it say then?
You're a piece of shit.
You pig, how could you do that?
No self-control.
So we want to balance that. And then say, no, I'm treating myself. I'll have 4. Something in the middle. But make sure it's not a cheat. It's a treat.
And to be fair, I had some of these cookies last night. They're small. They look like chips. You could just eat like
yes,
17
well, they
of
do
them.
build up over time. So,
Okay.
That's a small example of how it can needle you on. And that's just on what we eat. On behaviors, things we've done in the past, things we did as teenagers or young adults before we had our full brain and when we were very much more impulsive. It loves to wreak havoc there, haunt, and you can't because of this and that, or do you remember what you've done? Bring it up over and over. Yes, I remember fully. We really don't forget much unless we have a head injury or some kind of disease. We remember this for a reason. Even the negative data, even stinking thinking is valuable to remind us. Steer clear of this or that. Just like the feeling disgust. Imagine if you threw up and you weren't disgusted. Well, that's a little hard to imagine. You weren't disgusted at all. You wouldn't even think about correcting the behavior. Did I drink? Did I go to the restaurant? Maybe did I eat something? Do I have a flu? If you weren't disgusted, you wouldn't even do the analysis to figure out. So it's kind of neat the way what we think are negative emotions, they're just emotions that are guiding. 6 or 8 core emotions guide and direct us. It's like the lanes. They keep you in the lanes on the highway. Fear is very healthy. It keeps us in our lane. Makes us think about braking and distance between cars. So to learn fear was helpful at 30. I thought, what? Something you want to get rid of. No.
There's just a duality to everything.
Yeah, we're looking for balance. And I think a lot of people look at us therapists and say, I've just got to be more positive. Most people will come in with a lot more negative because we're animals and we're wired for survival, which is a beautiful thing. We're wired to survive. So we're going to attend to negative data wherever to keep ourselves safe, to make sure we don't run into trouble. So it actually takes a lot of effort to do the positive, to get the balance. And that's why I love your career in comedy. It brightens people up and taking a lighthearted approach without discounting their struggle, but a lighthearted approach that we are more resilient and humans have overcome so many things. You hear it in school. You hear, watch out for addictions. What was that, grade 5, racing against drugs. Watch out, say no to drugs. It's not even a lot of tools. It's just say no to drugs. But you don't hear, you hear all the bad things that happen with respect to drugs, but you don't often hear, wow, hundreds of millions of people overcome these addictions annually, and you can do it. We want to hear that more as part of that training.
Well, that sounds like a perfect spot to just park this conversation.
Until another day.
Yeah. I hope you guys have enjoyed this interview with therapist Jeff Packer, my dad, also the co-host and maybe just the star of Laugh It Off, the live podcast where we take your problems and turn them into laughs on the spot. So
you can probably tell we're proud of each other.
Well, it's also giving me an opportunity to get closer to you and get to know you better. And
thanks for inviting me to Chicago.
Memories.
I have tour dates coming up in these cities. If you don't see your city, be sure to join my guest list in the description, and I'll make sure it gets added.
All you need to do is laugh it off, just laugh it off. Oh yeah.